Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And to be honest, members, this is such a fast-moving process that when I first heard Representative Madre's response, I was like, oh man, I'm on the wrong bill. But Representative Fine assured me that I was on the right bill. And it's not appropriate for us to be preempting local governments when they make decisions, especially of such environmental importance, of the Keys. We, in this body, already banned the ability for the cities like Key West and Monroe County to even preempt the use of chemical-based sunscreen impacting their coral reefs. There's already been research and data of how much cleaner the water has gotten in this part of the state. And I do respect local voters and their decisions, but most importantly, members, I care about our tourism economy and keeping our water clean, especially in such pristine areas like the Keys, is critical to their economic success. No one's gonna come back to Florida if our water is dirty. And we care so much about water in this body. We talk about it all the time, but I am fearful that the influence of major corporations, especially on this issue, is impacting everyone's vision on what clean water looks like in our state. And so, yes, I filed this amendment directly because I am concerned about all of our ports, but especially the Keys. And I think that it is important that we respect the will of the voters. And so I urge you to vote up on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All those in favor of the adoption of the amendment to the amendment, say yay. Yay. All opposed, no. No. And so the amendment fails. Read the next amendment to the amendment.
Representative Eskamani offered the following amendment to amendment with title amendment, barcode 046421, between lines 28 and 29. Insert an amendment.
Representative Eskamani, you're recognized to explain your amendment to the amendment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm bummed out the last one didn't work out. Maybe this one will. So I mentioned the influence of money in politics before on this House floor, and it was released maybe yesterday, 2 days ago, that one of the folks who is a stakeholder in the Key West port, that it's a major business owner in the area that profits off the business within the port, has made a $1 million contribution through different political committees to the governor. And I'm sure they would be making gifts right now if there wasn't the gift ban on lawmakers. And I assume that when legislative session's over, folks might have checks coming their way. And so this is an amendment to address conflict of interest, because I don't think it's appropriate that money can buy off what happened in a referendum. I think the voters spoke loud and clear what took place in Key West. And so what this amendment does is that it attempts to ensure that if there's a conflict of interest with a elected official or a candidate, that the jurisdiction of such elected officials is exempt from the preemption. It's an effort to keep folks politically ethical, to the point where if they are benefiting from preempting this measure, then that preemption is moot. And that is the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Eskamani, in presenting the amendment, talked about stakeholders. And I want to explain to you why every member of this chamber and every constituent that you represent is a stakeholder. We have in Florida something called FSTED. It's the Florida Seaport and Economic Development Program. It was created in 1990 to establish a collaborative relationship between the Florida Department of Transportation and our 15 deep water ports. And we've codified an annual minimum appropriation of $25 million for seaport grant programs. The Port of Key West, as distinct from the city of Key West, has been the recipient of much of this largesse. FSTED right now has already invested about $1.9 million into a 5-year renovation project for Mallory Square. This is year 3 of that project. And according to the former city manager of Key West, Mr. Jim Scholl, and I'm going to quote here, the original purpose and justification for the project was to safely accommodate larger vessels and passenger-related operations. In fact, the original application for the FSTED grant includes a statement by the city that the upgrades are intended to support an annual increase in cruise ship arrivals from 338 to 363. And I say that not just to expose the hypocrisy of the city of Key West, but to make the broader point that all of your constituents in mind, in fact, every taxpayer in the state of Florida has invested money to build out the Port of Key West. So I would submit this to you. The city of Key West does not operate that port for the benefit of the citizens of Key West. They operate that port for the benefit of the citizens of Greater Monroe County and the state of Florida. And I would urge you to vote down on this amendment to keep our seaports open.
Is there additional debate? Additional debate. Representative C. Smith, you're recognized in debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. in response to Representative Roach's debate, that's nice. But what we're trying to do is clean out and drain the swamp with this amendment. Everyone knows, because everyone saw it, this week, the operator of a pier made a $1 million contribution to Governor Ron DeSantis. This is totally inappropriate. It's totally a conflict of interest. And this is absolutely the swamp that we are up to our necks in. The fact that someone can make a $1 million contribution to the governor to ensure that he will sign this bill into law is a disgrace. Vote for Representative Eskamani's amendment to make sure that jurisdiction is exempt.
Representative C. Smith. Thank you, Representative C. Smith. Representative Hardy, you're recognized in debate on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It may be true that Key West and the Port of Key West was the benefit of the state government's largesse, but the fact of the matter is that strings were not attached to that. There was nothing when they accepted that money that said that they could not continue to exercise their local democracy as they had prior to accepting it. And so the idea that after giving them the money, we now change the rules in the middle of the game, that's not okay. What this amendment is meant to do, it is meant to cut down on the influence of wealthy people. It is meant to cut down on the influence of folks who have way more ability to get to powerful people than any of our average constituents. And this is exactly the type of thing that I would expect folks who favor the little guy to support. The fact of the matter is the contribution was unseemly. And the contribution is exactly the type of activity that causes people to lose faith in our democracy at every level of government. This is exactly the kind of thing that causes people to check out. And so I support this amendment. And if you want people to be invested and engaged in our government, you should support this amendment too. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative LaMarca, you're recognized in debate on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I was going to say that Representative Roach covered all the important stuff about the port. But being that this is the amendment to the amendment and talking about draining the swamp, I don't see Governor Ron DeSantis in this body here able to vote for this one way or the other. I don't see how anyone can make a correlation to what the back rows are talking about. But what I will tell you is if folks have a problem getting a hold of important and influential people, I would represent that Representative Eskamani, Representative Hardy, Representative Sabatini, for that matter, have many more followers than probably the folks that own that pier down there. I would venture to say that we all need to vote down on this amendment. As much as I appreciate you bringing it forward, you have a lot of influence.
Is there further debate? Further debate. Representative Roach from Representative Schoaf's desk. Oh, correction. You've already debated. Sorry, Representative Roach. Is there further debate? Further debate. Further debate. Seeing no further debate on the amendment to the amendment, Representative Eskamani, you're recognized to close on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. It's good to know that folks think I have influence because being in this back row does not feel that way. But seriously, members, it is such an important amendment for folks to consider. We are trying to drain the swamp. We are trying to drain the swamp. And yes, Representative LaMarca, the governor, is not in this body, but if this bill passes, it will go to his desk, right? And of course, there are members here that also need to think about how they're voting. Are you voting because it's in the best interest of your community, or are you voting because someone wrote you a check? I mean, candidly, that's a question I think a lot of people ask themselves every single day in this process. With COVID-19, we don't have lobbyists outside in this rotunda, but usually we do, right? And that's a constant question that folks are asking themselves. And what I want you to think about is which weighs more, right? Should $1 million donation to the governor beg him to vote?
Representative Eskamani, please make sure to stick to the substance of your amendment to the amendment. Remember, we're in the Florida House. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will wrap up. Just to weigh those two, right? This is the will of the voters versus some major special interests, and I'm siding with the voters. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Having closed on the amendment to the amendment, all those in favor of the adoption of the amendment to the amendment say yay. Yay. All opposed, no. No. And so the amendment fails.